the dude's been winning a lot lately in the court system, and but you'll never hear that, from certain people on Clubhouse.
Dude, that is not a real thing. It did not just happen for real.
Hey, hold on. Sometimes the chat gives us some good info here. So Soren, who now goes by the name Alex, he says ICE needs to remove all Zionists out of the U.S. and dump them all to Israel. Don't threaten me at the time.
Dude, please. If you want my guns, I'll give you the bullets first.
Roger, there's also a comment in the group chat that says anyone who uses French dressing should be deported. It would really clean things up. So, sorry, I meant Mojo.
Mojo, do you use French dressing?
No, we were just chatting about this. I prefer Russian dressing or blue cheese dressing, and in general, I think French food is good. I even took a cooking class a few years ago, but that was to meet women. I think Italian food in general is better than French food, and I'm willing to fight about that.
Roger. Sorry about that, Mo.
Dude, French cuisine sucks.
I do not eat blue food. Nobody should eat blue food. Period. End of story.
Let me ask
Blue means fan.
Doc. What's this? Why don't we just ask Paige a question, because she's the French expert here. So, would you agree with this statement, Paige, that French food is beautifully plated, perhaps more plated beautifully than any other cuisine, but it's overrated when it comes to food?
I think that's fair. It's all about the technique, right? And they have a cuisine that kind of separates themselves because it's highly, highly technical, and then, good products, and there's a simplicity to it, so you're not going to get a lot of flavor a lot of times, but I think, I think that's fair. I don't think it's overrated. I think it just depends what you're looking for.
I love how we can weave in and out of these conversations. This is amazing. I'm gonna go on mute for a while, but this has been a lovely conversation. JB, great room.
JB, did you hear about the chicken factory out there in Nebraska?
Chicken factory.
And the argument was, these Americans, they're working these jobs that the Americans wouldn't want. So when ICE raided it, the next day, a lot of the city citizens went and put in applications for those jobs. Those jobs were filled within 24 hours. What do you think about that?
What city? Please, what city was that?
That was Omaha, Nebraska.
The same thing happened in Mississippi under Trump's first term. One of those cities south of Jackson had a chicken plant raided by ICE. I think they got 300 or so people and deported them. And right after, all the people in the community was like, "Thank you, we've been trying to get a job here for forever."
I almost feel like it's a loony liberal talking point that Americans don't want these jobs that typically go to illegals. Because as we've just heard, Nicole, I think that was Nicole and the gentleman who spoke after her state, these jobs are being filled up. I've been seeing videos on TikTok of American construction workers praising Donald Trump for job openings on construction sites. And a lot of these workers are saying they couldn't even get the jobs before the massive rollout of deportations, because apparently there was no room for them. No one would hire the American workers. And now that a lot of these construction sites don't have their so-called illegal workers, imagine that. The positions are being filled by hardworking American construction workers and builders.
Yeah,
the one thing that anyone in real estate or construction would also say to you is that, yes, they may very well be hardworking American construction workers, but the definition of it's comparative compared to other American construction workers. Yeah, 102%. But compared, anyone who's been on a job site knows. Because that's also a loony conservative. Like, yes, I agree with you. That's a loony liberal talking point that they're taking jobs that Americans don't want or anything like that. There's so many people who are looking for jobs that are happy with it.
When you say, hold on, Pat.
Is that like?
Pat, question for you. When you say liberal talking point, what do you mean by liberal?
I was quoting what she said. She said it's a loony liberal talking point.
But what is a liberal talking point? Because
you can ask her.
Well,
I'm just confused by liberal.
I say liberal talking point because it's generally, from my perspective, I'm not saying it's exclusive to liberals, but a lot of liberals are always, specifically politicians. Jasmine Crockett, for example, going on and on and on about we can't deport the illegals, we can't, enforce ICE and shipping them back to their countries because they do the jobs that Americans don't want to do. Now, I'm not saying this is exclusive to liberals, but anytime I hear that point, they do the jobs Americans don't want to do, it's generally coming from the loony fringe left.
Well, but again, the loony fringe left and liberals is a conflation that I don't think we should make. I think one of the biggest mistakes that Republicans or conservatives have made over the last 30 years is the vilification of liberals. What you've done by doing this is you've lumped in the far left, you've lumped in progressives, and you've allowed them to be called liberals. We should welcome liberalism into this country. In fact, the founders of this country were radical liberals, and I think that we should allow for that space, and we should call out what we should be calling out, which is the lunatic progressives. And so those are and by the way, when somebody says they're a liberal and a progressive, they don't know what either of those terms mean.
Well, to that point, I agree, but you probably have noticed, and I wonder what your take is, the past, year, we've seen a handful of longtime Democratic or liberal-leaning politicians, for example, who've abandoned the Democratic Party. And their stance is because the modern Democratic Party has gone too far left with some of their ideology, some of their policies. I've heard the statement, the Democratic Party, I didn't abandon the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party abandoned me. So I do feel, in my perspective, there is a difference between liberalism, as we've long understood what liberalism to be, the progressives, and then just like we have the far right with their seemingly fringe viewpoints, I think a lot of people have decided or concluded that there is a fringe sect within liberalism that they're either called far left or the loony left. And some of the ideas that they support are not ideas that are upheld by, to lack of a better term, your typical liberal. So when I call them loony liberals, I'm not lumping the progressives and the old school liberals under that umbrella. But I get your point.
Yeah, and again, I think these terms are important, and I think a lot of people just think that that they're all synonymous, and leftists, right? For what it's worth, where does left and right even come from? And I would welcome the French people in the room to speak on this, but Americans are probably a little too slow to know this, but it really comes to, if you sat on the right, you were in support of the crown, and if you sat on the left, you were opposing the crown. And so you can then take that to mean shorthand that you're against tradition if you're on the left, and you could uphold tradition, and which is where we get conflations about conservatism and liberalism being left and right terms. But ultimately, what it comes down to is the important distinctions is, what do you value when it comes to liberty, when it comes to justice, when it comes to equality? And what we find is that the progressives are the ones that want to weaponize
government to force equality. And really, what would save us all is if we would go back and listen to the classical liberals, which came up with these great ideas, which many conservatives, not the ones today that are running around calling themselves conservatives that want to weaponize government as well, but the ones that said, hey, look, those are some pretty bitchin' ideas that those radical liberals came up with. We should conserve those ideas, right? So that you can have conservatives that are protecting classical liberal ideas. There's a lot of synergy between these two groups. But ultimately, what we need to embrace is the idea that we should prioritize liberty over you should prioritize liberty and justice, and you should forget about this idea of equality, because we're not equal. Everybody is very different in their skills, their knowledge, their ability. And I think the sooner people realize that equality is a myth, and trying to force it through government, mandate is where we get our problem.
Well, before anybody goes, hold on 1 second. I'm out of here, guys. Have a great day. I know Nai's gonna be a great top left. Thank you. Nai's gonna be a great top left. I know she's comfortable with him. See you guys.
Hey, Roger, just real quick, man. I agree with everything you said. I'm just curious as to your stance on, do you think the meanings, the definitions of words evolve over time?
I think people hijack words, of course. I mean, let's once upon a time, the word gay meant happy. So yes, you could definitely hijack a fucking word.
Got it. So
And I do, real quick, and I go, when we were talking about
Wait, hold on.
the job site.
Wait, speaking, this is now, I just want to say something to my fellow mods. I'm going to be silent in the background. I have 2 back-to-back interviews to conduct, so Mojo, Steve, say, just so y'all know, I won't be able to adequately moderate the space for a hot minute because I'm about to jump on.
You got it, Nye. Have a good interview.
All right.
So, thank you. So when we're talking about these people coming in and raiding job sites like home builders and all this, you got construction workers who are truck drivers who go in there and move those backhoes and all that. As of June 25th, they can no longer use a translator to read or write or speak English in truck driving, supposedly. So they're being tested on the road. I think this is good because that means more Americans are going to be able to get these jobs in truck driving. Yes, they say we have a shortage, but we've also, during this shortage, taken on a lot of people that are foreigners who come here supposedly with a visa for truck driving who don't even know. And Florida has proven that they have given, through their DMV, a lot of people licenses that shouldn't have been through the DMV.
And to what you just said, cool, like the being able to be not using translators, and it's not just for Hispanics, because like with my job, my job, I deal with a lot of Eastern European truck drivers, and they're a pain in the ass. You can't understand the shit that they're saying.
They're included in this. And that's why I'm saying this is going back. It's going to hit deep. And this means these Ukrainian Russians and the people who don't speak it aren't going to be able to continue with their license or have gone through Washington, I think, state where they had an issue. I might be wrong on the state, but there was another state that had issues where they were handing out licenses to drivers. But this is important because we operate construction equipment. We were But yeah, I mean, it's a good thing that he's doing what he's supposed to do when we ask.
Can you remove Cody?
But yeah, I mean, that's important to me because that means that maybe more of our fellow Americans will actually get jobs, and these truck drivers won't be coming over or getting their whatever temporary license.
No, it's fucking just what the fuck. For the record, there's no law that requires truck drivers to speak and write English. There are laws in Florida and probably other states that require people to be able to understand
the road signs, road rules, and be able to respond appropriately to law enforcement.
So these laws that go back to the 1990s aren't really rules, or actually further than that?
Well, did you hear? Hello, stop. You asked a question. Did you understand what I said?
Yes, I do. And they're
Okay.
supposed to be able to read and write and speak it. If they can't read, write, or speak it, they can't adequately read road signs. They may have an idea.
That's not true. No, that's not true. Look. Here's an example. Hello. Here's an example. I don't speak fluent Spanish, but I know what to do when I see an alto sign in Mexico.
That's not the American language is required.
Oh my
The
God,
English
likewise.
language is required for
Likewise.
driving trucks.
No, it's not. And I invite you to tell me right now or post in the group chat the
I
actual
will
law.
post as soon as I stop
Fine.
driving right now.
Yes, cool. I know.
There's an actual law from the
Cool.
and maybe even 70s.
Cool. I know. Cool. I know you're a truck driver. I know you know a lot more about the rules of driving.
June 25th, it went into law again. And he's actually enforcing it. The law
Okay.
goes out there.
You go ahead and post it or say it that requires a truck driver to be able to speak, read, and write English. You go ahead and do it.
Okay, I will get it, and I will show you as soon as I stop in about 15-20 minutes.
Thank you.
I was gonna say too.
Oh my God, Patty, you little bitch, Steve.
Yeah, I deal with a lot of truck drivers in my line of work.
Yeah,
Majority of them are
busy
Ukrainian and
today,
Russian.
though.
And they can barely speak lick of English. Like, they know just enough to sign the paperwork that I give them, and for me to sign the paperwork that they give me to exchange our cargo and freight that we deal with. So if there is a law, it's not being enforced, bro. It's,
And Sig, hang on. I want to follow up with Sig. And Sig, I presume they know enough English to read the signs of the road and be able to respond to law enforcement if their truck gets stopped. Am I correct there?
right. Well, that's
Okay, so the law, what it says, I'm sorry, so I'm just gonna read
Why is somebody interrupting Sig when I asked him a very specific question and he's answering it?
yeah, just
Steve, you asked about the law, Steve, and there's a law.
I was talking to Sig.
No, initially you were talking to Paul. See, I don't want to argue with you, Steve. I'm a moderator as well, and I'm interjecting. You requested a law, and I'm interjecting. I'm not just one of the people in the audience. I'm a moderator as well.
just Anthony, just let me answer this question.
Sure, no problem.
You gotta answer your question, Steve. Yeah, because in order to get a Class C license to be a truck driver, yeah, you have to be able to pass the state and federal mandated, like DOT testing like that. So they know just enough to get them to where they can acquire that license, so they'll be legal.
Can I speak on this?
I think Anthony wanted to.
I think Anthony wanted to speak.
All right. So apparently, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations mandate that commercial drivers be able to read, speak, and understand English well enough to converse with the general public and respond to official inquiries. That's a mandate, of that federal organization.
But it says just enough. Keywords, just enough.
I just wanted to speak on this. There's a lot of truck drivers that are using actual phones to convert it in their app. And yeah, when they take the test, they're doing it internal to whatever company, like Big Swift Trucking or whatever, that they have somebody that speaks their own language training them on how to get their CDL. So that is a big part of it as well. Swift and Knight, they crack down. Swift and Knight will do that because they know they're one of the biggest trucking companies and they don't want to break the law. So Swift and Knight, they own about quite a few trillion.
Cool, can I finish?
What?
Can I finish, Cool?
Cool, wait a
Swift
second.
and Knight.
Cool! I don't falsely say they are training.
Well, They are treating, but they're not doing it to do just get them by. They got to know.
Right.
I'm not saying they don't know anything, so chill a little bit. But they are helping them get their tests, and they are using cell phones to translate road signs because they aren't as fluent as they should be. And there was a crackdown this spring where the federal motor carrier said that they are going to be enforcing the laws already on the books more. And I think that'll take away some of these bigger companies that are undercutting some of the owner operators as well. So I've been involved in trucking before, so that's my experience with it. And I'll leave it there. Cool, you can dispute whatever you want.
Miss Carr, can you get a little closer to your mic? You're kind of sound like you're far away. Kind of go.
You're better now.
Yeah, that's better.
If we are truck drivers, people who are operating logistics shouldn't be able to be into, much like the Fed day, like if there's information on paperwork or something that needs to be done, we need to understand what's going on, what's being signed, what's being carried, what's being toted. Even if you start thinking about like it just hazardous materials or things like that being cared for, if something was to happen and it was to spill on the road, they need to know how to read those NBSs. They need to know what they, in an event of something like that happening, what steps they need to take as a truck driver. Like, there's so much that goes into that. Just being barely able to read things or even just using a translator, that serves its own issues in its own way, because what happens if the translation doesn't come across properly? What do you do then? Like, it should be an expectation, especially here in the States where the majority of our paperwork, our information is written in English, that you be fluent. For me, it should be fluent in reading, writing, and speaking English.
It is. That translator stuff is actually being, June 25th is when that changed. They can no longer use a translator to do this stuff.
We'll see how well that gets enforced. Because, like I said,
they're doing it in Georgia. They're doing it in Washington State.
Goddamn, cool.
They're doing it in Florida.
Cool. Relax, bro. Relax.
You're seeing how far it's going.
Cool.
It's being done.
Jesus
It's
fucking
talked
Christ.
again every single.
I think when some of these motherfuckers' mouths open up.
I muted him, Sig. Please continue.
It's crazy to me, man. I think some people, when their mouths open, their ears just shut down automatically. It's like this weird check valve shit, man. But anyways, what I was saying is we'll see how well that gets enforced. Because like I said, I've had issues with like when we land to either help cargo or to drop cargo off. Usually the semi trucks come onto the airplane, the aviation tarmac or the ramp right next to our plane, and we load and offload shit. Sometimes these brokers, with some of our shipments, you know, we might get scheduled to have, 30 pallets or 30 skids full of parts. Well, the manufacturing facility was only able to make 15, but the paperwork doesn't reflect. And when I'm asking about the paperwork to make sure that all the counts are right, part numbers are right, things like that, anything outside of, sign this piece of paper or, 25 pallets or 10 pallets or
It's gonna take some time. They're weeding them out at truck stops, at weight stations. They're getting asked these questions at weight stations and at truck stops. So they're now enforcing it at these weight stations. So they're not catching everyone. There's still gonna be people falling through the cracks, but they are starting to enforce it when they're going over scales. If they hear you can't speak on English on the scale, when you get weighed, they're pulling you in. They're gonna ask for this stuff. They're purposely looking for all this. So it's just not that it's not being enforced. It's gonna take some time. It just officially is being pushed right now. For a long time. Yes, I'm on the road right now. I said in 20 minutes.
Okay. What's your two channels? What's the two channels you have?
Two channels, 19 and 9.
Okay, use the truck. Gotcha.
Here, you want to hear me on my TV?
No.
Radio check?
No.
No. You don't have to do that.
Well, I do have a TV.
What you run? You run the Cobra?
I got a Bearcat 880.
Get you a
I do want one of the Striker. Striker is better. But they're like 400 bucks. Striker's $400. They're a lot better.
Okay. Cool.
But I don't know, man. It's the Nard's got a point, and I remember. You guys remember that documentary with what's that? With fucking Mike Moore. I think it was like Me and Roger or something like that. He made that documentary, and he had that interview with Phil Knight, who was the founder and CEO of Nike. And that was the same talking point Phil Knight brought up back in the 90s when that documentary came out. Because Mike Moore asked him, he's like, you know, come build a factory at Flint. We got so many.
That was Roger and me. He started the.
That's Roger meets the documentary.
And that was GM. That was not Nike.
No, it was Nike. Phil Knight was the CEO of Nike. He was interviewing Phil Knight in that interview. In that documentary.
Not Roger and me. No.
Okay, it might have been another one. Yeah, it might have been another one. Might have been another documentary. But there was a documentary where Mike Moore was interviewing Phil Knight. And he said, hey, the unemployment rate in Flint is so high, build a Nike factory here, and we guarantee you we'll have a bunch of people that you can employ and that will happily work in your factories to make a living. The first thing that came out of his mouth was, oh, Americans don't want to do this work, pretty much alluding to they're too lazy. This is the type of work they don't want to do. So, you know, that's the reason why my factories are in China and I'm paying people 15 cents a day to make Nike shoes. But I think a lot of that is an excuse. I think it's bullshit for these corporation owners to get away with, you know, making more revenue and keeping more profit in their pockets. But I do think it's bullshit. I think Americans are more than happy when if it comes down to starving and having a shitty piece of, you know, a shitty quality of life. I think most Americans will work in order to get a better quality.
And you don't realize how many of these that are lane clearers, backhoe operators that are loyally in there that don't actually get their official license. They've just been doing it for a while. Because you need a license for some of these machines, and you're supposed to have a backhoe operator license or a land clearing operator's license to flatten the land. There is a process for that. So that's a big thing.
Fearless, good job, man.
Jump, go.
Hey, Sig, it's good to see you. It's been a long time. I just wanted to respond to that thing about Americans don't want to do the work.
Oh shit, what up,
It's
man?
either
What's
not
going on,
true.
brother? Good to see you, man.
It's either not true or it is true because the conditions of the work are abhorrent, and Americans don't want to be subjected to, slavish labor in a shoe factory or some shit. So, maybe they're honest because of what they subject their workers to, and they know Americans wouldn't tolerate what they say.
So what I find ironic is, you have the progressives who are supposed to be the party, that cares about the small folk, the average worker, and they're cool with, these foreign-born nationals here legally, illegally, whatever the case may be, undocumented, whatever the case is, working under these slave-like conditions. They're cool with it as long as, they can get their, their cheap fruits and vegetables and, wherever they go, Whole Foods, whatever. They're A-okay with it. I think that's super ironic.
Hi, can I chime in there, please, Anthony?
Of course, KK.
Right, thank you.
What's going on, KK?
Why do people...
IKK, long time no see.
Long time, love you, long time. Love you, long time. So I live in a border state, Southern California, and a lot of people don't know because maybe they just, they don't have the migrant workers welcomed into their community, but there are legal programs called seasonal migrant workers that go through the companies, and the companies, they actually go through E-Verify by federal system. Now, why this is good is because someone's like, oh, their housing, their wages, they are offered housing, they are offered medical underneath this program during their time and season of work, and then they're offered fair wages. So there are programs out there that actually execute this. Now, the person that was talking about the backhoe, well, the corporation or the business that hired illegal.
Is this room title based on projection?
When you're talking about business insurance, your premiums and your coverage will vastly go up if there is a claim.
You mean books? I like books. Do you read any books?
As well. So the corporations and the businesses
But the point here is that it gets that,
they're saving money. So when we're talking about
Yeah, give me a good book club suggestion.
there's definitely already a role in place. A lot of people don't know that.
It's a great PTR. Do you know what it means?
I'm going to piggyback on what KK said. The federal minimum wage, and I stress the federal minimum wage has been $7.25 an hour for the past 14 or 15 years. Now in New York and California, minimum wage is give or take about $17 an hour. I think it's the same in Illinois and other states. And in fact, I checked that. It was said earlier, about 15 minutes ago, the minimum wage in that state was $13.50 an hour. My reason for bringing this up is because when we talk about a fair wage or a living wage, KK is 100% right that there are tons of employers that are hiring illegal immigrants over Americans simply because, and I said this an hour and a half ago, that we are not, we're looking the other way when it comes to employers paying illegal immigrants or Americans under the table cash less than the minimum wage. And I'll land it here. When they do that, they are breaking the law because they're not only misclassifying their employees as independent contractors, they don't have those cash under the table workers on the books. Therefore, they arguably do not get the protections of the law for employees, such as health benefits, such as a place to live for seasonal workers, such as workers' compensation insurance. So if we really wanted to affect change, and the issue was brought up about getting our low-cost vegetables and fruits in the market, we would clamp down on employers who are breaking the law by hiring people off the books, be it legal or illegal. Thank you.
So ridiculous.
And then, yes, our vegetables and fruits would go way up in price, absolutely. Unless, of course, we imported them from outside the country, like we import a lot of vegetables and fruits from Mexico.
And then the actual farmers in border state areas that provides migrant workers or illegal workers for meals, they would not be able to keep to offer the full same price as that crosses over the U.S. southern border in Southern California, and then also the fields that are worked by illegal migrant workers. So it's detrimental to the overall base pay and the actual business vertical for American citizens, because then it lowers the actual pay for that. And they can say, well, I didn't do it.
Well, I think it's kind of weird that a lot of farmers have business practices too, which is why you see people that are on TV complaining are the ones that I'm a young like business practice. They are. They rely too heavily on government subsidies and different things like that, and not a bill for money. Like let them fail, let them fall out, and let mom and pop go back to where they were, who actually run a proper business, who actually is responsible. I'm saying something I laugh on this all, especially when we talk. Black farmers are not out here complaining about not having workers. We're still fully stocked. We're still out there pulling crops and raising cattle.
I'm just not not bothered by the idea that the food economy being corrected in this way, not having people hired illegally, whether they're legal residents or not. All of this stuff, like, okay, so we solve all these problems, and now the food is expensive. Well, then that's what the food is supposed to cost. That's the true cost of the food, and everybody needs food. So let's just accept that, and all the other prices have to adjust. I guess rent will have to go down, or whatever. But, you know what I mean? Like,
No, it's not
we
that.
need the fucking food, and it's a huge part of the economy. It's a lot of work. You know, agriculture represents a shitload more labor than real estate. I understand landlords do a thing. Property management is a real job, but it's a lot less work than growing the food.
Well, let me say this. It wouldn't want to develop. It really wouldn't. The reason why it's going up is because the people have bad business practices, and they're still going to take a huge profit from it. That's the reason why it's up. It's the same kind of concept of how many people, you know, the housing prices are being different. You know, instead of you just taking $100,000 in profit, you have to take what you would actually make, which is maybe $20,000, $30,000. And eventually it will sort itself out because, you know, one or two people have to get close to it. It's so expensive that people are going to start going to the mom and pop shops, i.e. the food stamps and things like that. Because what you know is we go to that shop. I can go get Bell Pepper for $23 versus going to Walmart, Publix, and all these places and getting $2 for $1. There's one thing that people are going to find ways to sort it out. What you'll see is the buyers again, smaller businesses. And they will get decontracts and different things because guess what? Farmers are going to realize they're going to spend that much for their vegetables. So they're going to see
I guess we're agreeing. We're basically saying we should allow everyone, like, culturally, as a society, we should embrace the idea of less profit. Like, you gotta make a profit, make a living, great, but you don't need to pinch every penny everywhere, because that mindset is what leads to all these stupid problems.
Well, if I may ask you, where do you draw the line between too much profit? And be specific, thank you.
I mean, you know that's a very difficult question. It really depends.
Of course it's a difficult question because I don't think anybody should be limited on how much profit they can make. I think if you can become a billionaire, hats off. But you think, as with other people, you know, there are people in your camp that think you shouldn't be allowed to make a certain amount of profit.
No, I'm not in the camp of capping things. I don't care if someone has $1 million or $1 billion. It's not about the amount of money. It's the percentage profit over your business.
Well, with all due respect, sir, where do you draw the line?
I don't know. I can't answer that question exactly. I just think the mindset of, you know, every penny of profit over other values is detrimental. It causes all these problems. They're like hiring
too much profit
people and, you know, undercutting the wage.
So you're asking for price controls, right? That's what you're asking.
Well, I'm going to say I think that we basically have professional people on farm, which they farmers and things like that. We haven't taken about 30% of what our farms and stuff is, and we still live very comfortably. Like, it's not that hard. When you talk about people over here, you can't operate your farm without subsidy because that's the reason why people are making such a huge problem. If you can't operate your farm and be able to pay your people a normal wage, your farm housing, your government, or your farm meetings, once again, it comes down to what you're trying to do. Are you in it because, you know, you actually need to be in it and make a living, or are you trying to do it to get rich and it's fucking failing? So now you're pissed off.
Mrs. Clark, are you aware at all of any of the increase in price of inputs that have hit farmers in the last 5 years? Would you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm aware. Once again, I'm going to say it, I know I'm going to be facetious, black farmers aren't really doing it. All these inputs, all these things, it's a lot of it.
You're saying black farmers aren't struggling for from higher input costs?
No, but white farmers are, or Asian farmers are. Well, I wish Brian wasn't on the phone, 'cause he's probably driving his tractor right now, on his farm. So what I heard from him, which is what P was bringing up, was definitely the cost of fuel.
This is a bunch of
regulations that make the farmers have to alter their actual business model, and politicians don't take that into account when they're looking at how can we save the world. So yes, I totally agree there. Definitely outside factors. I think it's odd that you're saying black farmers don't have this. So do Asian farmers have this?
I don't know.
Okay, I understand it's jarring. Just let her answer.
So,
Can we be specific, please?
No, hold on. I'm saying black farmers don't deal with this because we realize the food costs are getting too high. I guess we've been trying to work around to it. And I think that's what I'm saying is a lot of people are so used to doing certain things a certain way. I think that this is that when something happens, they can find a work and should.
Which crop are you talking about? Can we be more specific, please? No, I mean seriously, please. Which crop are you talking about? Let's take it one by one. What do you mean? You're selling something, right? So you're making money. So what are you selling? Soybeans. Perfect. Let's talk about corn. Okay, perfect. Let's talk about corn. So what is the price of a bushel of corn?
In season is different from out of season.
No, it's not. Like, what are we actually talking about here? And do you know that like most corn farmers right now are losing $1.60 per bushel?
$4.
Yeah, it's around $4. Yeah.
Yeah, Brad being able to answer. Way to go, Brad. I'm proud of you.
I love you too.
I mean, you're just not a corn farmer if you don't know these.
No, I'm not a corn farmer. My question is that my business has always been about branching and using that organization. And that's happening today. What you're seeing is you're taking out a lot of the develop and run and operate that you bring now 80%. There's a lot of businesses slashed. And now because those governments can't use make a profit, they now have to use people which they were already speaking out on, leads to this bad business practices.
No, the cattle market is strong right now. I mean, can you say something?
Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, y'all have to find a way. If you realize that you're doing and starting to get to be too much because you have to find better ways to harvest your crop.
But all farmers do that.
Can you tell me how to find another way? No. Yes, thank you. So can you tell me practically, like, let's say the fuel costs are very high and I'm farming 10,000 acres of corn. What is the workaround for that? Electric combines?
Whatever workaround there may be, I cannot fathom how this is a racial thing. How is this a black thing? I don't get it.
But I think that,
Argument was, I'm just going to repeat what Mrs. Clark said. Her argument was black farmers, they find a workaround to the issue to solve to get a better bottom line than compared to other.
Yeah, I don't
All
think
farmers do that.
I don't think that she was trying to be like, oh, black farmers gonna deal with this type of thing. It was, like, to be honest, like a lot of the black farmers and ranchers and stuff like that, they don't have large operations. Their operations are really, really small. So a lot of those people who want to do this stuff, a lot of them don't. When they're in whatever industry or whatever type of farming or industry they're in, a lot of them don't even get government subsidies like to begin with. So they have to do a lot of the work themselves. They don't really hire people at all if they have anybody. So it's like most of them, it's like them themselves or their families, it's like they're not doing it. And they pretty much they can't afford to grow things that are out of season. Like some people, they just have to do things a certain way because they just don't got the money. They're not that big. A lot of them don't have these really expensive tractors that for example, like you go get a John Deere tractor and it only can be fixed by John Deere because it's got proprietary software and shit in it, and that shit costs a fucking lot of money to get fixed when it goes down. Like some of these smaller farmers, regardless of race, can't afford that. So like a lot of these smaller farmers don't deal with some of the bigger middle players or bigger farms and cattle people have to deal with because they don't use the same stuff sometimes.
But Aaron, that's across it because like Bridgeport Farms out at I forget where they're Alabama, Georgia, somewhere around there. That's a 10,000 acre multi-generational black owned farm. It's one of the, I think it might be the largest black owned historically. I can't even be sure. I'd have to like use the Google it, but some people just use ChatGPT. But like they have equipment there, and even many small farmers, like if you ask them, they're not going out and spending $100,000. In fact, they combine resources. Like during harvest season, they'll share equipment. They'll work together to actually bring in the crops. I mean, like even in regions of Minnesota, Montana, Dakotas, you will see tractors flying across the roads going to various farms because they'll share equipment, they'll share labor. And to bring in their harvest to help the community grow because they realize that, hey, not only do I have to get my crop in, but I also need my neighbor to make sure they bring theirs in order to keep this viable. They're not looking to sabotage each other. So like your idea of John Deere, like, I don't know, Brian, how many John Deeres do you fucking own? Like, no, people don't really like it. The massive farmers, yeah, they have the older one, but they're not rushing out there to spend $110,000 on a small tractor that is going to basically break down and that they have to go and pay a fortune just to get it repaired. They already doing this. The idea that it's separated by race. No, farmers are some of the most ingenious, inventive, intellectuals, education experts you could have in terms of land, weather, and everything else out there. And they all do it. They all partake. It's not split among racial demographics.
Yeah, can I jump in really quick?
And that's what Brian said, is he's an actual farmer. He said all farmers change for a lot of lives.
Yeah, opportunities by time. Hold on, Aaron, one second.
Expansion.
No, I know, we're running to your point actually, because that's okay. The way you said it is perfectly fine, which has to do with size, right? You're not doing the commodity crops like corn, soybeans,
We have a right to protect
you're talking about.
what's that got to do with us?
You know, you're talking about.
I got no beef with Roger. I don't go looking for a fight. Neither do I. That's your bad one.
And next time it'll be yours.
Or Bill's or Frank's. If you weren't already thinking that, you wouldn't have come here tonight.
But it has nothing to do with race.
Is bad. Jim comes in. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to win. I need your help. In exchange, I'll be proud to call it.
Okay, they do like some of the smaller stuff like I was talking about because they can't afford to do anything bigger. Like yes, like how Brad was saying, like you do have some that are like have these 10,000 acre ranches, yeah, but that's not a large population of black farmers.
Well, there's less than 2% of farmers in America. Oh, are you not done there? Sorry.
Oh my bad. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, when you start talking about small farms, I mean, less than 2% of America are farmers right now, and 1 in 50 kids are going back into agriculture of people who are in agriculture. So we're just getting less and less because we have the equipment. A small farm anymore, yeah, 150 cows, that's nothing. That's a small farm. You do that without a tractor. And the same thing when you start talking, when you get into produce farming and some of that, it's a lot more hands-on labor, so it does take more infrastructure and people to make that happen. When you start talking about cattle and row crops, you have bigger equipment. Yeah, one tractor costs $100,000, and no, that's not one that's locked out by John Deere or Case or Kubota from the right to repair. A lot of that's just protecting their Tier 4 and DEF emissions software. I can repair my own tractors about 80% of the time, but a lot of the time I don't have time to tear a tractor apart and replace the transmission a 3-day job because I have cattle, I have livestock that need taken care of. So if you want to talk about it from the scale side, absolutely. But let's just remember, all farmers are working together, and they are very inventive and make things work that don't work in a lot of sectors because they make sacrifices, and usually the least paid person is the actual owner.
Totally. Yeah, and that's the reason I push back on Mrs. Clark and Hunt, because this idea that there are these big corporate farms that are just greedy and taking money, and that's why groceries have gone up, that's not the case. Like, if you look at the actual people who are farming corn in America, these are family farms, like essentially all of them. And sure, they're specialized and they have $1 million combines and things like that, but they are not making a profit right now. I mean, literally losing money to, you know, as they plant their fields and as their corn's growing right now. They're not going to make any money this year. And so it's just that, like, if you're not understanding how high the inputs have gotten, you're just not understanding the reality of the situation.
I just
and
want
those
to interject.
small farmers are going to go out of business, and we're going to lose more family farmers. Then you can really have the big corporate ones take over. But sorry.
Most of the distributors actually, correct me if I'm wrong, P, but Brian, like most of them are still operating like they just started to recover. They're operating at 1% cost or profit. They actually were taking a bath for a long time, operating in the red since the pandemic and trying to get back those costs. So, I mean, I don't think they're just hiking up just to go ahead and, you know, pull every nickel out of somebody's purse. They're sitting there trying to figure out the operating cost because, again, like Pete mentioned, Brian, I've heard talk so many freaking times about this. The insane regulations, that are expenses onto farmers that are passed by people who sit in offices that are AC and order McDonald's every day. Those people are passing regulations onto farmers without ever so much as seeing a common person. They have no idea what it takes, what they're asking for. One of the prime examples I heard in one of the, I recommend is go to the agricultural groups like Clubhouse that rant every freaking day and listen to what these women and these men say, and they'll tell you how weird some of these state regulations, some of these town regulations are, like an expansion of a pig pen, just to transport a pig, a hog. They have to expand it out by 2 inches miraculously because some politician in some suit somewhere in the city said, now you have to do this. Now they have to, you know, if they're a hog farmer, they have to now sit there and expand and do all these changes that it's a huge cost to them. And nobody actually said, hey, does this actually benefit it? What is the rationale for this? What is the purpose of this? They never do this onto the farmers. And so I think a lot of people, you should go out to a farm and actually see how hard these men and women work, how hard their children work, and what all goes into their day-to-day lives before trying to make these broad sweeping ideas that say, hey, this would fix our food supply. Because like Brian said, 2% of our country is the one that feeds the rest of us. And I'm telling you, if you start pushing them out, you're going to be beating each other up for apples. And I know this is factual because you beat the shit out of each other in parking lots over toilet paper because you couldn't figure out how to fucking make that shit last.
No, and I'll just say, like, you can look at the increase cost over the last, I don't know, 10 years, and then you'll notice that it went drastically up during COVID when we were having supply chain issues, and then, you know, other reasons. But that hasn't gone down, but the corn price has drastically dropped, right? So when you have situations like that, you're just not making money. And Brian and I talk a lot about this, and I'm, you know, in the farming side and the equipment side, and equipment is down, you know, 40% nationwide in terms of sales. And I mean, the price of combines right now, a small average one that would be $550,000 is now $750,000. And people can't afford that because they're not making any money because the corn prices are so low. So it's very complex. And I just have to stand up when I think people are saying that people, you know, the farmers are just taking extra profit because they're not. And I care about farmers. But Brian, please.
I was just gonna say, some people might say, well, why would you even farm if you're farming it for a loss this year? And that's because if I did farm it, it'd be an even bigger loss. So that's the biggest thing. I'd lose $30 an acre instead of $5, and that's what we're trying to pencil in to this whole thing. And yeah, I mean, it's been 18 hour weeks this week. I know there's other people that put in work too, but when you have, especially livestock, you can't just turn the key off at the end of the day and walk away. You have to take care of the livestock. And it's not just the row crop side. I know there's a lot of row crops that go into the animal agriculture in America, but there's people so far removed that even people in my small town of less than 300 people.
I got a question for you, Brian. Because Brad mentioned Is there any chance that these people? Oh shit, he's on the fucking phone. Well, anybody else who's in there? I'm just curious because I know, like, when you look at Amazon and Walmart, like these corporations that squeeze out the mom and pop organizations, like they were all for legislating a higher minimum wage, around 18 to 20 bucks an hour. Not because they gave a fuck about their employees, but they knew the mom and pops couldn't pay that much, and that would just further squeeze out the competition and give them more coverage. As far as taking over certain industries, is the same thing happening in agriculture? Maybe are there lobbyists for these bigger conglomerate corporations that are buying up all this farmland and buying up these mom and pop farmlands and things like that to add to their corporate enterprise? Are some of these people responsible for making the regulations heavy, knowing that the average mom and pop farmer can't afford these, but their multi-billion dollar corporations can?
I know that in the ag industry, especially the meat industry, there's been a big shift. So I ran a company and we did massive structures for a lot of these people. And this big push that they're doing, especially in beef, I'm out of it now. But at that point, there was a massive push to have these large lots. And it was driving the prices down. Walmart was getting, the big corporations were getting involved into this. This hurts the small guy. But there's a lot that, listening to this, I grew up in the Midwest, so Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska, that's the area we served, that's the area I grew up in. But seeing how, I love it when people want to talk about, they think these farmers are getting these profits like they were just saying. They'll take the $5 an acre loss over the $30 an acre loss. They don't understand that they got to pay for crop insurance, and then when it gets flooded out, do they really recoup? Well, okay, they got to replant. Well, a few years ago, the people that are farming on here would be able to explain it more. You couldn't get seed to replant. There was a shortage, so now you're out. It's a very different world in farming than it is in everything else. The cost, and they can talk to you to this, it's probably very different, but to hook into the GPS and to do some of that stuff, systems are for $50,000 just to connect to. The dollar amount that these farmers got to put into what they do is insane. There's no way, like if I decided I wanted to farm, there's absolutely no way that I could get the money to do it. Farmland went from about $2,000 an acre to, at that point, that the family sold out theirs, it was $14,000 an acre. Try to come up with enough land to afford to pay for your equipment alone, and look at the value in that. Then you got your inputs. So big corporations, yes. When I looked at the big farmers, they were buying land, and they could make it work a little easier than the small guy. But the small guy owns far more land and is more valuable to our system than the big farmer is.
Well, in Corey, my parents are farmers. In Corey, my father was looking at 11 acres to buy right beside our property, which we own 110 acres, and 11 acres for $275,000. That's like close to like $25,000 per acre. Like that's where like these small farmers, we don't have the money to again re-up these equipment. And then when we had the seed shortage, there was deals, backhand deals without a doubt going to your larger conglomerates of like Tyson and Reynolds, which is near us, where it's just the small farmers couldn't get anything because we weren't part of those deals. And that's what's going on with so many things. They're not just the government subsidies, I believe, that these large corporations are getting. Again, I'm not in it, my parents are, and all I hear is from them, but they go to something called Protect the Harvest every single year, which is a nonprofit that helps farmers. And this has been going on for 20 years now, which is just that small farmers are slowly being forced out by government regulations that aren't being put on these corporations, that were held to a different standard. And then, on top of that, we are required to have these insurances, have these licenses that, again, these larger corporations don't have to deal with. And then they also play into each other of we're going to give better deals to this corporation, with seed and everything, or even feed with, cows. This just happens all the time, so.
Well, another thing is people want to talk about the impact. Somebody brought this up earlier, I got it right as they were talking about it. It seems like we're okay saying that we'll let these guys come across the border and work for less, but we want to have this high minimum wage for a standard of living. This goes for everything. Why are we doing any trading even with someone who is allowing we as a country have made a standard. If you can't meet it, Nike hired somebody to go into their facilities. And I'm bringing that up just as an example of what we do as Americans. So they said, oh, we're gonna hit the certain standards. So they went in and they're like, yeah, you don't hit the standards. So they moved their plants. This kept happening until they had no place else to go, and they just fired the firm that was doing it because we can't meet the standards, right? Well, here in America, it's the same thing. I had a builder that bought tons of buildings from us, and I show up, hey, we're changing out a window. Can you bring a window? It's a $700 window. I'm not leaving that place without the other window. I said, I had the freedom. I said, I'll just drive it down. Don't worry. I can do my work on the phone. I drive there. I get there. He used to boast about it. His staff, they were farmers. All his builders. Been with him, the shortest was 17 years. So in 17 years, what do you think he was paying those guys? $25 an hour, right? But guess what? All of a sudden I show up and there's not a single person there that can speak English. He was gone at the time. I can't leave a $700 window not bringing back the other window. Sorry, you just don't drop $1,000 off, right? So I'm sorry, I go back. He calls me and we have a conversation about it. He could no longer compete against the other builders that were coming in and paying those guys $12 an hour. See, this is what happens, is people think they're just picking vegetables. Okay, yes, they're getting involved in the trades. Here in South Florida, they're taking over the industries, taking care of lawn care, a lot of these things. They're going to come in and they're good. Their aspirations are big. But what we need to do is we got to make sure that we're doing the right thing, because you have to protect the system at play or it'll crash. If you ever get a chance, I don't remember the exact name of it, but if you just type in on YouTube, Gumball Refugee, World Bank data shows us how it works. We think we're doing something by helping people. Watch that video. It's not political. It is just on the numbers. And you'll see that by opening our borders, all you're doing is breaking our system and doing less to improve poverty.
Yeah, and getting it back to the immigration topic, I think the meatpacking thing came up about the raid in Omaha, I believe. And I don't understand anyone who would want undocumented people to be working in meat packing plants. Like, it is a dangerous job. It's very tricky. You have no recourse if you don't have documentation. There are big machines. There are slippery floors, and it's just. I like a lot what KK said, because once you fix this issue, then you can have, people who do want to come in.
Funny thing about that Nebraska thing, a lot of these people say, oh, we can solve the problem by going to the electronic checks. All of those people that they found had fake electronic documentation through the E-Verify. So that's what the meatpacking plant used, and they still were given bad documentation, and that's part of why the raid was handled or taken forward in Nebraska's meatpacking facility.
I just posted the link in there for the video I just said, but again, that when I was hiring staff, it didn't matter if I knew that someone was illegal. I had been told by people, it doesn't matter if the state of Minnesota came in to sit down with me before my doors opened up and explained to me what I was required to do. So basically, I had an I-9, I have them fill it out, I photocopy an ID, and I get it to them, and then I let them deal with it. And so this is where the shortcomings in that system are.
Well, I want to go back to this, though. I wouldn't think of that as a flaw. If somebody can use fraudulent information for E-Verify, once that's investigated, the mere fact that they've submitted fraudulent information, that is a crime, and so then you can punish that. So E-Verify, even when people are submitting falsified documents, it's actually work.
And if I could just piggyback on what Mo said, going back to the gentleman before, talking about how he got the information, he filled out an I-9, and then he got a copy of the ID. Just if you feel comfortable saying, sir, what type of IDs did you review, And since presumably you reviewed a shitload, did you ever submit a copy of an ID with the I-9 to the government when you and your brain knew it was a bullshit ID, if you feel comfortable saying?
Yeah, and that's why the state came in before I opened to sit down and walk me through exactly what I was required to do. They came in unannounced, and it was fine. They were in the area. I had no problem with it, And she sat down and simply explained that I don't have to even try to validate it. If they bring it in and get it to me, I literally would take that. If they had any other identification card, immigration card, I was just photocopy the two of them together and then submit it, and not to spend a minute of my time trying to decipher it. So this is, as the training of the state literally coming in and telling me. So no, you could tell it because other people there would talk about it, but no, I would just have to submit their application with the I-9 form. It was very simple. They just didn't want us as businesses to be getting involved into trying to determine and then being held liable. So they wanted us to understand that they show it, it's on them, and as I believe it was Roger or whatever was saying, the burden falls back on them, not me as the employer. So that's kind of where you look at it. You could be a little skeptical, and you just go. And in the area that I was at, it was very, very strong area for a lot of illegal immigration. We had meat packing plants continuously getting raided. It was one of the largest places in the country for, hog confinements, and so there's a lot of that in that area. So they do a lot of that to kind of protect small businesses in the rural areas. So that's kind of it. You have your hesitant, you have your thoughts. You can look at an idea and say this looks really shady, but no, just do it.
Let me just say, I appreciate your transparency.
Yeah, I think the importance of requiring documentation, it extends outside of just this issue. I was listening to Elon Musk talk about some of the Doge requirements that they were putting on entities that were requesting federal funding, where all they did was change the requirement where you had to, if you were requesting government funding, you had to present a receipt. And then all of a sudden, entities that were requesting tons of federal funding, once that requirement went in, they wouldn't submit a single thing anymore because they didn't have the receipt or they knew they were full of shit. And so just simply having these guardrails and creating a process where people have to present a paper trail of what they're doing, because if you then falsely report something, then that's a crime. And so I think this is the way to go. I think this is we're a nation of
as a country. Well, we have to look back, and what's the root of the problem? Is we didn't do what we were supposed to, which is, like Roger said, uphold the law. And I'm sorry, any politician, any law enforcement officer that violates their duty to uphold the law, there should be no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They should be removed from their position because you're taking an oath. We are expecting our law enforcement officers, our politicians to be held to a higher standard. But if you look, they're held to a lower standard at every cause. Sexual harassment, taxpayer, they stay in their position because once they come to a settlement, the taxpayer pays for that. If it were you and I, we would lose our job, potentially go to jail, get sued, right? This doesn't happen to them. Everybody's above the law. And the fact is that we had an administration that did not, I don't want to even get political, but we just look at the numbers, did zero to uphold that border. Trump wasn't even in office. That morning, they said that the border encounters were damn near zero because they just knew what was coming. So when people understood they're upholding the law now, it stopped. So we can talk about the cost of it. Is it right? All this stuff. We need to start holding people accountable for failures that lead to these problems. I mean, they're saying that we've got over 1,000 people from Iran here that they're concerned about. During the Biden administration, Department of Homeland Security raised the terror threat to the highest level ever for us here at home, domestically. That was then. That's not Trump's Department of Homeland Security that did it. That was Biden's. So we know what's here, and it's only here because we didn't do our job, and now we're doing the job, and everybody wants to say, well, that's going too far. I disagree. Like Roger just said, we're a nation of laws. Guess what? Uphold the law. We're all accountable for that. They don't get to choose in your neighborhood. Well, we're not going to go ahead. We're not going to write up anybody for selling drugs anymore just because everybody's doing them, right? No. They still arrest people for it. You can't let some people break the law about it and then others, get away with it.
To also include Corey, there's a lot of illegals that come over, they've learned how to game the system. And when the system doesn't uphold the structure of what the laws are stood for, then everyone's going to come over and take advantage of it. To include, it's profitable for other countries. For example, Mexico, if the migrants would come into Mexico, they said that they're going to the southern west border, they would let them in. No problems, okay. And on the other hand, they knew, okay, these people have some money, so along their so-called, caravan trail to get to the border, they would provide food stations, water stations, and I didn't believe it until there's this travel blogger that I follow, and he did the actual caravan route. He's like, yeah, the government set up, okay, you can rest here. Here's water stations here, and he videographed all of it. It's on his blog. I'll try to find the video blog for it. So, because Mexico knows they're going to make some money, they're not going to stay in too long, and there'll be U.S. problems. So they gave the entire system to other people.
They're so good at it. I had a joke with that I found out after our incident with him that he had done it to 3 other employers, and when he had a knee injury, I went with him, took him to the hospital, went back for an evaluation of the legal rights of being represented as a company, blah, blah, blah. The doctor's telling him, we did the scan, here it is. Show me there is no damage. No, it's bad, it's swollen. Finally, the doctor was just looking at me and he goes, look at his 2 knees. His one's swollen. And I was just like, I'm no doctor, but it doesn't look swollen to me. He goes, there is no swelling, we would see it. This guy had the doctors literally explain there was no injury to his knee. He came to him, got a settlement. We were forced to hire him. I had my secretary get to the office earlier. I told him, you come into my office, don't go on the plant floor. He came out on the plant floor. Luckily, we had cameras everywhere. I told him I was letting him go. And then he told me immediately, I hurt my knee again. I tried pushing a cart. I already looked at the film. I didn't start talking to him when I got into that office. This guy did it again. And what did the state do? Got a settlement out of the deal. This guy was doing this routinely, yet we had witnesses, many witnesses in this small town. It's a small town, a couple thousand people that would see him going running, playing soccer, doing these other things, but he couldn't work. They learned to game the system. And it's not immigrants, it's people in general that can learn to game the system, and others that have a genuine issue can't get help, can't get disability, and it's how they learn to game it, I have no idea. But there's a lot of changes that need to happen. And I don't know who's just talking about Doge, but there needs to be receipts. There has to be. And if there's not, there's just no, I'm sorry. If doctors are saying this isn't happening, this is just, we got to start doing a better job all the way around.
I can't wait for AI and robotics to replace some of these jobs. So then the people that say that, Americans don't want to pay, more for their food. Okay, great. We'll get them lower costs, but it's going to cost jobs.
Absolutely. In the dairy industry, we'll just look at now. The buildings that we build, very different. Used to have they had big carousels. This is how they first did it. The cows walk in, they get their little food, they get milked. It's a great little system, right? But now, it's all in ear tags. A cow can try to walk back in again. It doesn't get its treats and it doesn't get milked again. But they literally have, it looks like a little mini car wash. Comes up, washes the udders. The cow walks in, it pushes the cow out. Guess what? Next cow comes in, and they want to be in there getting milk because they get a little treat. And it is 100% automated. You do not need anybody there. And as you get to watch the systems, they're there. And they keep people employed to keep people employed. Yes, and sometimes you don't have that initial big investment. But in the long run, you're right. The jobs are gone. When they wanted to raise minimum wage, I remember when that first came up, they wanted to raise minimum wage to like $15 an hour. And when that push came, there was some meeting of a bunch of all the fast food industry people is in Europe. They put out on the news a little video of from freezer to customer, completely delivered, their burger, their order, everything without a single person there. And what's the difference? The pickle's placed in exactly the right place every time. There's exactly 0.45 ounces of mustard. There's exactly whatever of ketchup. Everything's the same. The consistency is there. Why did they put that out? You can raise the wage. Go ahead and raise the wages. Our bottom line is we're here to make money. And if we can't make money, we'll go to automation. It's either jobs, or whatever. But you look at the people, if you look at the people that are most affected by raising minimum wage, it's low-income earners. As a matter of fact, in the fast food industry, single black mothers were the #1 most impacted people to lose their job because of that wage hike. But we want to ignore those little facts when we talk about, hey, someone's out there really grinding, trying to make it. Well, I had a guy who was going to lose he came to me and he said he's going to have to put in his 2 weeks. I was like, why? We're working like 72 hours a week. Well, yeah, he had 4 kids. He had help, for assistance for, he had SNAP or whatever, the food assistance he had, living in insurance. Well, by the time it all came said and done, what he was going to end up paying, and once he lost everything, he was going to be making, without figuring in time and a half, just straight up on it, $3 an hour. He's killing himself for that wage. So instead of finding a system that helps people get on their feet, and maybe it weans them off of the system, so to speak, so they can build up a savings account, maybe we put some accountabilities in. No, we just cut it. So what's the best option to do? Well, I just have to quit my job. And until we decide we have to come up with a better means, so what if we have to pay them for a little while to help build up that safety net, to help get a savings account, an emergency fund? I would much rather do that than say live on the system continually. But, politicians never look at that. Why? Because they've never dealt with it. They haven't had an employee that wanted to dig itself out from the bottom. And you can see the emotion in his eyes, the tears in his eyes welling up when I couldn't help solve it. I said, we'll be fine. I'll work this out for you. No, the numbers don't work.
Are you daft? Billionaires live off the system every fucking day of our lives. I don't understand why you're counting
I'm not talking about billionaires and fucking system.
Wait, hold on. Water, mute up for a second. I'm going to help you out here. Corey, you were done speaking. He piped
the only fucking person there
not listening. Hear what he has to say without interrupting him. There's this weird tendency that people have on this app where it's like if somebody challenges them, they are very quick to do their pushback. Let's get his complete thought out, which is probably going to be stupid, and then you can go ahead and respond. Go ahead.
It was just that, responding to a stupid statement. Yeah, you're right. It's probably going to sound stupid what I have to say. Stupid is as stupid does, right, Point?
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, Water, your evidence that millionaires live off the system is that stupid is as stupid does. Is that accurate?
My response to you is stupid is as stupid does. The fact that you're complaining about the poor living off of the system, and while we have the rich hemorrhaging this country, funding the wars, not fighting them. It doesn't make any sense.
Water, I don't know what conversation you're talking about, but I never even alluded to that. That was other people talking. I simply listened to your comment, which you said the prior speaker was stupid. Then you stated, we all know that millionaires live off the system, and you were interrupted. Roger then told the gentleman not to interrupt you, give you an opportunity to get your point out, which is probably stupid. And all I've heard you say so far to back up that millionaires live off the system is stupid does. Maybe you have some other specific reasons why you think millionaires live off the system. I'd love to
answer ahead of time and speaking for me is what I was responding to. So, without the narrative, simply put, universal basic income is necessary to get out of this mess.
All right. Let's concentrate on that. Everybody in the country should be paid exactly the same wage. That's how I define a universal income. So, if you were president, if you had your hand on the button, how much money should each person get? No more, no less.
For starters,
basic income.
For starters, yes, that's right. Without it, all the other benefits included, everybody still receives your benefits. $4,000 minimum.
So you're saying a minimum
Americans,
every.
and then one moment, and then all veterans gets bumped up to $8,000. This is for starters. We don't know where the economy is going to be in the next year, not even the next 5 years, let alone 5 or 10, but we must address it as the inflation comes at us, because it's going to come. Hold on, one more
Water. I got
It's
a
going
question.
to come at us. It's
Water,
going to come
water.
at us in full force as automation is
Water, I have a
already
question.
here. So
Water, I
there's a
have a
regime
question for you.
change.
Hey, Mo,
I understand you have a question. I still have to
let
finish my
me ask
thought.
you one question first. Your thoughts enough. Just a follow-up question. Since you endorse that, how much more would you be willing to pay each year in your tax dollars to make that happen? How much would you be willing?
As much as need be.
Okay, got it.
Go ahead, Mo.
Yeah, Water, I have a question for you. You started this before you went into the UBI thing that you probably don't even understand. What I want to ask you is, you made the comment that millionaires live off the system. What do you think, how much tax revenue out of all of the tax dollars that the federal government collects, how much do you think of, what percentage is collected from the top 1%?
Billionaires don't collect taxes. They
No, hold on, Water. Listen to my question. No, you're not. Listen to my question. I'll say it in
I already heard it.
Oh, well, no, well, then you weren't responding to it.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. You gotta ask something that makes sense.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and you can either say, you can either answer it if you know the information, or you can make up an answer. That's what most people in Clubhouse do. Or you can simply say, I don't know, which is probably the smartest thing to do. Hold on, hold on. I'm gonna ask you a question. This is not gonna bode well for you. So he left.
Damn it, I had two major questions, Roger. Stop scaring people away.
So the reason he left was because he was going to be asked a question. These retards, they don't like to be asked a question, but I'll answer my own question here, just so you guys can understand this. This is why people like him are just fucking retarded. 46% of federal income tax revenue comes from the top 1% earners in the country. So let me repeat that. 46% of all of the federal income tax that's collected comes from the top 1%. Okay? So this myth that the top income earners don't contribute, the 1% are contributing 46%. If we expand that to the top 5%, it equates to 59% of the overall income tax dollars collected. If we expand it to the top 10%, it accounts for 70% of income tax dollars federally collected. So let's just do the math here. This means that 10 out of 100 people are funding 70% of the federal budget. So again, I've given this example before. Let's just say 10 people went to dinner. This would be the equivalent of one person raising their hand and saying, hey, this would be the 10%, right? 1 out of the 10 would say, hey, I will pick up 70% of the dinner tab for all 10 of us. And the rest of you, the 9 of you, you only have to pay for the 30% that's left over. And yet you have people like Water that want to come on these stages and say,
that the high income earners are not paying their fair share. It's quite literally the opposite. In fact, you have large percentages of this country that don't
Tax
contribute
revenue out of all of the tax dollars that the federal government collects. How much do you think of what percentage is collected from the top 1%?
But they are a fucking drain on the system. Not as big of a
Billionaires
drain.
don't collect taxes. They don't. Hold on. I'm gonna listen to my question. No, hold on. No, listen to my question. Listen to my question. I'll say it in Oh, well, no, well, then you weren't responding to it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. That makes.
Roger, this was never more apparent to me. I moved to the Miami area. A client has the neighbor, their house, and they pay over $200,000 a year in taxes. They have never seen them. They have a staff maintaining it. They're inputting into an area that they might use once every 2 or 3 years. They're paying into a school system that they don't utilize. We have people who have 3 to 4 properties in one, and I'm talking multi-million-dollar condos in one building, and then they've got them in other buildings. And to say they're not paying their fair share, they're paying more in one house in property taxes that they don't live in than most people will pay in a lifetime.
Yes, it's great. Let me ask you this. If you were at that dinner of 10 people, and let's say the top income earner picked up 70% of the bill, and you were one of the 9 that had to pick up the 30%, what would you say to the person that paid the 70%? Because what progressives would say is, hey, you got all the money, you should pay for the whole thing. That's what they would say. But what would you say to the person that at a 10-person dinner picked up 70% of the
Me, even though I'm not in his category, would say, let me pay for a little more than that. I'm sorry, but I would.
By having the comment.
Those were the 2 words you were looking for. You would simply say thank you, because the fact is that the majority of Americans have the comfort in their lives that they do because of people that are wealthier than them.
You know, like you're saying, when you look at the people, the top taxpayers, they always want to complain about big oil. Well, they don't pay an equal percentage. No, they don't. But if you look at the amount that they pay, their profit is they make less on a gallon of gas than our government does. But guess what? It's a product that is in every system we use. The paint on the curb, the finish on your furniture, the sheets, everything has got a petroleum byproducts in it. It's in everything. And the fact is they are supplying the most needed product in the world, and their percent of profit is smaller. But yet they're still the top taxpayers. And it's like people forget that. I was like, go ahead and charge them more. Great. It's no different than a tariff, right? Or a corporate tax. Where does the dollar come down to? The consumer. Whatever they want to add on, it's just going to roll down to the consumer. The oil industry pays an immense amount of our tax burden. And that's great. We figured out a way to do it. And they're okay paying that. Yeah, it's a smaller percentage. People get stuck on a percentage rather than the value. Why does a person that has never had kids, he's been single all his life, he's a billionaire, he's paying in millions and millions and millions of dollars into a system that all he does is sit on his yacht all day, right?
Well, hold on, but Corey, before you go from one topic to the next, here's the point that needs to be made, right? And I think you got part of it, but there's a bigger problem. Like what you're saying is that if you put a tax burden on those that produce, that like for example a corporation, which by the way corporations are not my favorite entities anyways, but I really simp more for the small business owner. But if you're going to put if you're going to say, hey, you're the wealth generator, we're going to go ahead and collect more from you. Here's what happens that's even worse than what you said. You said that they'll pass that on to the consumer, and that's what happens. That's what happens if they can make the margins work. If they can't make the margins work, what they do is they close their doors, because if the consumer can't pay what that increase would be because of the cost going up, then they just say, oh well, this business model no longer works. So now instead of having an increase, you're going to have a shortage. And here's the reality of it. An increase in price is actually what you described. is not as bad as having a shortage of services, and because ultimately, when you start doing things like controlling price and controlling wages and all of these things, you're putting such an unnatural pressure on things that what you do is you increase the chances of having shortages. And when you start having shortages of items that you care the most about, whether it might be medicine or baby food, whatever it fucking might be, these are big fucking problems. This is why you should let the free market be free.
Oh, and everybody agrees. I love it.
I'm still mad because I wanted to ask him about his veteran status, because in his PTR he had over the face of the soldier, I don't know if that was him or not, he had African Nazi, and then he didn't cover up the name tag on the soldier's uniform. So I was, whenever somebody talks about vets and they have, a uniform in their PTR, I kind of quickly glance at it, and I was just kind of confused by his PTR, and I was going to drill him on that, but, you scared him away.
I don't think that was him, Bradley.
And I scared him away by asking him a question.
He was drowning.
He was probably just out of a discharge. I doubt he ever fucking joined. He looked flat-footed to me.
Can I ask a question since we seem to be in a lull of conversation?
Ask away.
Okay. I think in the past, 4 or 5 months, since closing down the border, the U.S. military has created a buffer zone area approved by the states that is then run and controlled and guarded by the military. And it's caused 0 issues. We have people coming over in that area. But then it's kind of smart because then they would fall under federal guidelines. I want to know if people would be okay with the buffer zone across all border states that would be protected by military and following the federal regulations instead of each state.
What do you think the benefit of that would be?
Well, there would be one system, so it's not a catch and release. It would be under protect the border as far as any type of violence towards federal officials, because it would be federal land. And then they would be able to process illegals crossing over the exact same way that they do on other areas, to include like military bases. So on military bases, they use the U.S. State Department to do that.
So here's the problem that I would have with federal control over the state borders, is that you have to think about which administration is going to be in and how they would use these powers against you. So when you have, like, let's say a room full of the people that are on the stage today that probably in their lives that they do, maybe Texas is currently handling the border versus the way that, let's say, California is handling the border. Now, if you had Trump in office and you thought, oh, okay, we'll have the federal government put the military and now the federal government is responsible for the border. What happens when we go through these cycles and then you get, I don't know, let's say AOC becomes president in 7 years, right? Well, let's just say she is. Would you, with her as president, would you want the federal government controlling all of the
Not all borders now.
Yeah, so I think we got to be careful about that. I think that,
for those that say that, I remember when Texas was doing their thing and protecting the border, the Biden administration wanted to go to war with the people in Texas, and they would play that game where they would cut down the fence and rebuild the fence. They're playing that little cat and mouse game. And the federal government was in disagreement with how the state was doing it. And I remember people arguing, and I think rightfully so, that hey, this is Texas's job to protect the border. However, in California, they have a different approach to it. They just kind of let anybody, any Tom, Dick, or Jose in the country that wants to come in. And so, like, if you could get a constitutional amendment that said that border security was going to be adhered to, and that you were going to take the executive power away from making decisions that could lead us back to Biden-like policies, then maybe I could be interested in that. But I look at what Biden did to the border, and I say that less government control at the federal level would be best.
You know, the reason I asked that, I had a dinner with my friend, and he is in the area, he's in the military, and they're actually using that buffer area to test out new equipment, different types of these trucks, stuff like that. Which is like, okay, that's a good way to do it. And then they're also testing out procurement projects for the military as far as new AI and observation crews. So it's pretty interesting. So we were talking about it, and I shared with him when I lived in Cuba one time a day, if a Cuban national would cross over or would get swept up by the Coast Guard, the protocol was they have to claim asylum. If they claim asylum, then they are held in an area that is not accessible by anyone else on the base, and they wait for the U.S. State Department representative to process their claim. They give them a certain time to process the claim, and if they feel like, okay, yes, then we are then put in a system that a lot of faith-based organizations, NGOs, which will place that Cuban national that's claiming asylum into other countries. It's never guaranteed the U.S. Most of the time, what they do is they try to place them in other culturally assimilated countries, language-wise, that is close to Cuba. So it made me think of, okay, if there's this border, this buffer zone, just in that short span, it would then kind of regulate as far as, lower the propensity of violence on border patrol, people that are bordering it, and then it would go through a State Department, so which they could be actually vetted on not only on a U.S. scale, but then also shared with other countries to ensure that they're not actors in processing fake asylum claims. The problem is it's just catch and release. Oh, well, then you have to wait for your court date or whatever, and the courts are so backed up, and there aren't enough of them. It's that's the reason why a lot of them are like, okay, well, I'm just waiting. To answer Abby, what countries? I'm not sure what you're asking. I was talking about Cuba and Guantanamo, but the countries that they would be placed into would be like South American countries. I don't know if that was what you were referring to, Abby, but I don't. It feels like on the national security topic, having a process through State Department would be a better vetting system for CBP, because CBP does not, their databases don't speak to other databases, which causes for people to like kind of split. There's a reason why there are thousands of various countries on the other dimensions. They drop of type 1 and possible. Yes, Abby, same language. So when we lived on Guantanamo Bay, the Cuban nationals that claimed asylum and they were waiting to be placed, a lot of them went to Guatemala, and then also Guatemala, I think Guatemala and Panama. But those were based off of NGOs.
thing, though, KK. I think, and I've said this prior to Trump taking office, and I had a lot of people on the left agreeing with me. The trickle-down approach seems to be working, because if you actually look at the actions by the Trump administration that has kind of forced Mexico's hand for all of their pontification speeches and all of their morality speeches, Mexico is currently deporting massive amounts of immigrants and securing their southern border. This is new. Usually they just funnel them through, and Mexico is not playing games with it. So it's actually fascinating to hear that approach is actually working. Kama's plan, I believe, was to provide economic zones and opportunities subsidized by U.S. taxpayers to give it to companies that make like t-shirts like Colombia and Patagonia, and as long as they put factories in these countries, and they said that'll help. That didn't really work. That was her big border secure idea, and that was just as dumb as anything else that she's ever stated on. So I think right now, I agree with Roger. I see your point, though. It would be nice if we could have a federal buffer that all presidents in the future would actually honor and adhere to. I think the U.S. government, under its federal system, would actually do a better job of catching those that we definitely don't want in the country, most particularly terrorists, and then being able to secure them and handling it at a federal level with a decreased cost to the state. But the same concern would arise with me is, what if you did get AOC? Oh, dear God, we'd all be flooding to Canada, I guess, because they have a secure border and they don't allow people in. So, I mean, it would just be a nightmare to give that kind of power to it.
Yeah, everyone should be deported and or shot and killed instead of deported. Execute them or just deport them. Clean up the country. It makes sense to you guys, right? Stupid asses. Stupid asses.
This is Goat's transgender profile.
Yeah, but you were excited. You were excited when I said kill them all or deport them all. But that resonated with you, didn't it? Didn't it?
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Edmund, don't you live? Edmund, I don't even think you live in the United States anymore. Don't you live in Costa Rica or Mexico or something?
No, there's no Edmund here, you stupid bitch. Stupid ass.
Really? You're gonna go there? So you, the transgender fucking wannabe that's on
I'm gonna deport all of you. I'm calling ID right now.
really cool one, because
I'm recording you guys right now,
they
sir.
have a voice, and someone has like a brilliant idea, and all you do is
right now.
and I don't got time for it. Like, I mean, you can try to do it, but it's like those balls swing. So using your nuts and stop trying to say something. So again, you're going to lose every fucking little point you take in Edmund or Goat or whoever the fuck you are. And I think that you weren't sound like you're really
I'm crying, you stupid ass. You stupid motherfucker. I'm crying.
stupid. Why?
Brady's streaming.
Okay, hey, I have a question. Do we think that Point is Goat or Edmund?
Edmund's Edmund.
I think Goat.
Edmund.
Yeah. Well, the voice sounds more like Goat.
It's not me. I'm sitting here in my office. I'm in a bunker in Tel Aviv.
One in the chat if we think it's Edmund. Edmund.
What if Edmund and Goat are the same person?
Well, actually, Edmund is John Kitover, who's running for Congress. So, who's actually revealed quite a bit of his own personal information, which I thought was interesting.
Yes, let's see. He lives in the Chicago area. He claims, and I believe him, to have act as a consultant, probably some type of former employee with the federal government, I think the IRS. And he's got a gazillion different profiles and streams multiple rooms, and also has the Clubhouse Plus account as an Anon. I think he was in here earlier. He was the Anon, but obviously he wanted to come on as that point, but that's Kitover, no question.
Well, there you go. There you go, John Kitover.
That is not me.
I don't know how his campaign posters would be with him doing yoga in his fucking Fruit of the Loom underwears that were stained and going upside down like that just doesn't. Yeah, no, he's not gonna win.
And if anybody doubts what we're saying, just go on to Google and look up John Kitover, Illinois. You can also put in Edmond or whatever, but he's got multiple sites on Google. John Kitover, Google that.
What's he running for?
Congress.
Oh boy.
To be fair though, I mean, got a lot of crazy Congress right now. It wouldn't surprise me.
I know. I mean, look at New York. Anything can happen.
Anything can and will happen.
Yeah, I love the New York City mayor debate. A lot of the people that are progressives are like, look at socialism is going to work. Look at all the promises. He's going to mandate a $30 minimum wage. Can't do that in New York City. He's going to do rent stabilization. Here's a flash thing. Rent stabilization was already occurring. He's not going to actually limit more development of homes. So that's going to be a loss, and you're going to lose investments there. What else was? Oh,
Free subway, free buses.
Free subway, free buses, which if you should look at the financial numbers of that transportation system and see the cost overruns that are actually occurring with the maintenance as well as the development. That's going to be, I got to figure it out.
I don't think he has jurisdiction on that, right? Does he have jurisdiction? This isn't that Kathy Hochul that would have jurisdiction over that?
Yeah.
Transportation.
Here's another one. State-run grocery stores. So you want this idiot think somehow from New York City as a mayor that he's going to be able to institute, quote, state-run grocery stores. Somehow remove all that. You let me know how that works out for you in New York City, because for those of us that are a little bit older, I remember the 80s and 90s in New York City. I remember all of that shit. You remember de Blasio? How quickly we forgot about his socialist, like, fucking virtue signaling and how much money he built off the top. And this guy comes in and says, we're going to do all this, and yet has no authority, no power, absolutely nothing to implement any of these things. And somehow he thinks it's going to be there. Where's this money and revenue going to come from to help maintain fucking, I don't know, the subways and buses? You're
forgetting the biggest one, Brad. Defund the police.
Oh yeah. We're going to send untrained social workers to handle crimes in New York City. How did that police movement work during BLM and the COVID pandemic? How did all that shit work out? Because I recall a whole bunch of people, or in the 80s and 90s when cops weren't fucking actually cracking down on people. How did that work out for the citizens, the people that were, middle income or lower? They couldn't fucking get police in their areas to stop the violence. How did that work out for you in the past? So you believe this twit, who's been in the country, 6 years, all of a sudden has the magical answer to run a major city, and somehow people are going to gravitate towards this? You want to destroy New York City? Go ahead. That's why all of a sudden on the news this morning, all of those investment firms, a lot of market areas in Wall Street, were already signing agreements to come to Dallas, Texas. Like, you're going to drive out absolutely everything that made New York there. If it doesn't have the financial markets, the fashion market will leave. The rest of it will just be, I don't know, give me a city that's really, it'll be St. Louis. Like, if you want New York City to be St. Louis? I don't think so. Nobody wants that shit.
Well, how could you go there as a tourist and feel safe if you don't have police around, or if something happens and have that insecurity that you won't have, active NYPD around you? That's a scary thought, what it'll do to the tourism business.
Well, even the business aspect, how many of those high-income earners would leave than the actual city, right? Commercial real estate would go down, also residential real estate on that high price point would also be a detriment too. It would kill the...
And here's the other part, state-run grocery stores. I want you to think about that. Like, Nixon tried to do price controls, and to be fair to Carter, he shouldn't be blamed for all the economic crisis under his terms. But Nixon tried this shit. It was stupid. It didn't work. It backfired. Long term, short term, it caused massive economic depressions across large swaths. If you put state-run grocery stores in there, and you're going to maintain that, and you lose your Kroger's, your Wegmans, say goodbye to absolutely everything. Like, people didn't like government cheese when I was a fucking kid. I sure as hell don't want to see it being fed to me in a grocery store that's mandated by the federal government, who's going to determine what rates, or not even whatever waffle Hogo is, who's done nothing more in her entire career than just like behind her ears and just allowed herself to play. But I mean, Jesus, like, you want those people, you want AOC, you want people like that to determine what foods are in there? They're not going to do a good job. New York City under Hochul can't manage itself. De Blasio couldn't manage it. Like, I hate to tell you this, but you should have stuck with Cuomo. You should have went with that guy. At least he has someone in the brain. He's fucking retarded, but fuck. You guys are.
Someone just put in the chat that it works in Pennsylvania with the state-run liquor stores. Having lived, my whole life growing up there, Pennsylvanians go to New Jersey, and the most successful total wine store in the country is at the border of Delaware and Pennsylvania, where the Philadelphians go. The state stores are a shit show. They always have been. And, I mean, it's just remarkable how that can screw up an industry. So,
the state of Oregon controls all the liquor stores. You can buy wine and beer in the market, but to get spirits, you have to go to a liquor store, and it's all controlled by the state. I think the same thing maybe in the state of Washington, but I'm not certain. Definitely.
Same with Utah.
you should see the revenue in Camden, Cherry Hill, and in Wilmington of liquor and everyone crossing over. Do you still look at your car when you would cross over the Walt Whitman or the Ben Franklin Bridge to see if you had booze in it? But I think those days are over. People are just buying their booze in another state.
It's the same thing for everybody who lived near the New York, or even was like a few hours away. They just drove into New York, even on like from Erie, etc. They would just go up and buy their booze there and come back down. I mean, like all this state-run stuff you think is great. If it's so great, why isn't it like fucking breaking in months? Why do they operate at a loss? Why are they having to be subsidized? If you have a total one that far exceeds the model, and then you have state-run ones that operate in the red, tell me where is the greatness of it? Tell me what was so great about that implementation that it fucking magically controlled things. It doesn't. And your grocery, good luck. You fight over those apples and oranges. And the last person to leave New York, make sure they turn off the lights so we don't have to pay the electric.
What else was he going to implement? There's still more stuff.
Yeah, the defund the police is crazy. I want to tell you guys this. New York City is probably one of the best trained police forces in the United States, especially for their counterterrorism. And when they're not constrained, I'm not saying there aren't fucking morons in the police department that are bad. That happens in every profession. Not discounting some of the injustice New York City has been plagued with in terms of its police. But overall, the New York cops are probably one of the best trained police forces in the entire nation. They go through a lot of certification, they control a lot of areas, and they respond as first responders. Responding in a city of that magnitude is a fucking challenge, and they do it. And you're going to defund them? I don't know and understand where people's heads are at when they start saying this stuff, and then you thinking fucking Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks sipping latte princess that weighs 300 pounds and wants to be a social worker for her life because she's noble and with her pink hair is going to walk into a hostage situation or a crime. What are they going to do? Ask the fucking murderer, like, how are you feeling at this moment? What's going through your head? You think somehow or another that's going to work. And oh, by the way, a lot of those crimes, regardless of how you feel, which demographic, whatever it is, the police have a hard enough time curtailing them. You can look on this on social media. watch it. How about the fucking individual, poor girl that was raped on the subway platform? How about, what was the other one? The shooter that existed in New York City. Like, everybody's outraged when those events happen, and the first question you ask for is, where's the police? Now you want to limit them? What are you going to do? Send a social worker in there? What are they going to do? How are they going to be able to take somebody out? Please. Well, were they going to shake their Tim Hortons coffee cup and say, here you go? Like, have a good time. We're just going to sit down and chat.
I could keep going on him. Let's see, it's the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. I mean, he's claiming he's going to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel, who has diplomatic immunity, by the way, coming into the UN, just like every other world leader does. And he's going to arrest under something that the United States is not even a party to. I mean, it's pretty astonishing, the stuff out of his mouth.
Well, what's even crazier, Abby, is how the fuck did we get here that we would actually vote as a primary candidate a socialist, right? Like, that has zero experience other than being, what is he, a city council member? Never ran a successful business, has no idea how to do like big P&L.
Do you realize what a gift it is?
It is if it's not stolen.
You know, it's a huge gift. It's listen, for ages the Democratic Party would stand on stages and tell you, you know, when you call them a socialist, they'll say, oh no, that's not true. They would even self-identify as capitalists. And so now what you're going to have to do is you have somebody self-identifying as a socialist that represents the Democratic Party, and is the party going to really back him, yes or no? And then if they do, then they can't distance themselves from it. This is like, I don't know why any Republican would look at that. I mean, maybe if you lived in New York City, you would look at it and go, God damn, we can't have a socialist running. What if he wins? I can understand the fear if you lived in New York City. If you live in any other city in America, you should be excited. You should actually hope that the Democrats pull their full muscle behind it, so then they can't run from Labor.
So, Robert, politically, strategically, this would make sense what you're saying. But as someone who was born in New York and lived there, grew up there, I feel bad for New Yorkers. Like, everyone thinks that just